Good morning, everybody. All the distinguished members, professionals, both from the industry and the academia, both here at the dais and on the floor there. And thank you, ChemConnect, Pravinji, for this session. I remember we met about a year back, and I believe this was a good gathering where we get a day to kind of connect in terms of sharing best practices and sharing the current concerns. So when Pravinji asked me about Resilient, and haven't we always been bouncing back to the challenges that we have faced as supply chains or we have faced as an industry? Of course, disruption we've been talking about and Srikanth touched upon. I would just like to take on from there. When we talk about the last 4 or 5 years, while how do we classify these disruptions which are there? So of course we had a COVID, which was kind of impacting the health, and something which is cutting across the entire countries and societies and the basic people and systems and organizations, which kind of through a new set of learnings and how we operate. Whereas what we talk about the Red Sea is more of a geopolitical scenario, the Houthi attacks, and as a result the Suez Canal, which is available to us to reach from east to west or west to east, and that saves a transit time of about 3 to 4 weeks, and also additional costs, and which would mean more containers required in the system. So that kind of classifies under a geopolitical, at a global level. And then we also had the Panama Canal issue, which was, I would rather classify that into a weather-related or a climate-related, because suddenly the level of water in the lakes was not sufficient for the ships to pass through. In fact, now we are having a similar issue with the Rhine Valley in the Europe, basically, which is, and I was just thinking when Prashantji presented about the waterways project today, Europe is right now suffering the worst crisis in terms of climate, and given that they use waterways in a big way, the Rhine currently is facing challenges in terms of the traffic that they move along the river. Now, those of course are the geopolitical one. We talked about COVID and we talked about Panama. Of course, now we have the US trade policy and the related challenges and the response which is expected. So when we look at disruptions, or when we look at some of these external events coming in, what does it really mean? In terms of, while it all means that whatever we have created in terms of the organizations or our ecosystem it kind of has to migrate to this new level of challenges. Now, how were organizations created earlier, or how did we operate earlier? We like to operate with a planning cycle in mind. So of course there was a phase when we had to get organized, where having processes, SOPs, who's doing what and work instructions mattered, because that kind of defined the roles for every individual in the organization, especially when we talk about large manufacturing organizations, assembly lines and production. And when I talk about the supply chain, I'm referring to manufacturing, I'm referring to procurement, I'm referring to planning, and I'm referring to the last leg, which is execution. So that's where, largely the designs took place. And as we kind of went through this particular journeys, we had a phase of the physical processes that we talked about, and our whole larger part was getting the organization in line with respect to what is my plan for the year, what do I want to do, how much does my business wishes to achieve, both in terms of sales, in terms of EBITDA, in terms of product lines, and how many new products needs to be introduced. And when I look at a resilient supply chain, from this particular way of a regimental, transactional foundation, I would say largely, it has migrated to everybody in the supply chain to be alert for these kind of changes to be tapped. Now, when I look at one by one, what are the changes or what are the characteristics that look at a resilient supply chain in terms of specifically our industries? One is the ability to connect beyond your organizations on a collaborative forum across industry, across similar product groups, and take in the learnings faster becomes very, very important. And one of the key things which I say this is when we look at the whole digital backbone for optimizing all these new inputs, currently which was done at a range level or a month level, I think your ability to plan on the foot becomes important. That means how can you draw the first and the foremost is, does your entire variance in terms of external inputs to your sales, to whatever your cost, and the whole optimization which kind of gives you a plan to implement, do you have the ability to change that plan depending upon the inputs that come during the month, during the day, today, and am I able to come out with the best variant in that plan? I think that transparency and that level of digitalization, which I'm sure will get covered more in the next session, becomes important. Now, having said that, it's not easy because we are all used to kind of, you tell me what, everybody wants a structured approach. And this, I believe, is the most fundamental change that we all need to do. I'll come to the rest later, of course. It's always good to talk about the tariffs and the news and what all is happening. But the fundamental change for each and every member in the organization or your supply chain becomes that we all want to have a stable plan for the day, for the month, and then once you give it to me, I will implement it the best possible way. This is, I believe, the fundamental change. And to ensure that you have your planning ecosystems very aligned with this. Now, along with this particular ecosystem of the digital part, what is important is, it has never been more important for all of us to stay connected with your internal business and the stakeholders, including your vendor ecosystem, because a lot of information, a lot of changes, whether it is the port authorities, whether it is your service providers who help you export, who arrange for containers, the domestic truckers, vendors, and our warehouse service providers, all the more important that this feedback and the integrated business planning that we call matures to the next level. If that is not going to happen, then you are always going to get surprises. So the earlier informal way of connecting with people or your vendor ecosystem or your larger ecosystem, the informal way of being non-committal about information exchange has to somehow get integrated into the business planning process, which is the matured version of the SNOP or the sales and operation planning that we talk about, and we need to move to the integrated business planning process. The second part, of course, procurement, Shrikant talked about, so I'll little bit touch on that. The whole part of the sales and the procurement, who are two agencies in your organization which are largely connected to the external world, become really a source of information apart from just the commercial aspect of what is to be achieved. And therefore, that information, the digitalization of that, and the ability to respond faster in terms of whatever compliance and formalities that are to be completed. Let me take the example of, let's say, the whole paperwork along export documentation, or anybody supplying to the US markets. We all, or the markets or the organizations, have to get ready for the US season. That means your product need to hit, your containers need to leave by now. Actually, we are already sitting in August, or latest by September, for them to hit there, and then from there to the stores, and then be ready for the big season, like whatever Diwali season what we have here in the plus 3 months of the seasonal market planning which is done. So where does it, how do we develop the ability to respond faster? We still have way to go in terms of our organization systems to talk to each other. So export documentation and execution, I believe, is one area in terms of automation for seamless transfer. I think we have still a lot of to do, and we are not resilient enough. On the domestic side, our whole ability to execute become paperless and execute becomes more and more important on that particular part. I have left one area in terms of when I talk about the subject of risk and compliance. As earlier, it was always an extended arm or a one-time activity which is done along with the audits, or which is done along as a review if things are going fine. I believe when we talked about all these subjects, they are all risks in a way. So how we looked at our risks in terms of classifying them, integrating them into the business planning process, and some way quantifying if I have a mitigation plan plays a very, very important role. So with that, I think I believe these found the foundation of how we can go towards the resilient supply chain, and I'm there throughout the day, so we can obviously exchange more ideas. Thank you very much.